So I'm going to talk about climate change. Sometimes it's a little bit of a touchy subject, but I think all of us care about the same things. We just understand information in different ways. And just starting with climate change, what is it? It's the notion that we keep burning fossil fuels. It puts emissions in the atmosphere. It's warming the planet, and that is causing more problems. Okay? And by the way, this presentation, you don't have to take notes. Robbie's going to have the whole thing, and he's going to put it up on the website, on the Conservancy website. So anything that you see here is yours, and you're free to use it any way that you want. And I just wanted to start with people, in particular the people of Southwest Florida, and say, where are Americans on climate change today? And this goes back over the past 20 years. And the bright green line in the middle are people that are very concerned about climate change. The dark green line are people that are they call it the mixed middle. This is from Gallup. All the slides have the references on them. The mixed middle people are, kind of concerned. The bright green people are very concerned. The polls that have come out so far this year, in the first 2 weeks of this year, indicate the very concerned have gone up to 57, 58%. Americans have been getting more and more concerned with some of the fires in California and the Amazon and Australia, and they're worried about it. There's political differences in climate change. Some people are more concerned and some people are a little bit less concerned, but the highest consensus question that we ask them, and we do a lot of polling, is should Democrats and Republicans work together to address climate change? And 90% of all Americans think that we should all work together and cooperate to address the issue. So it's kind of like everybody wants it to be solved. We did a poll at the end of 2018 on Southwest Florida. It's a national poll, and we oversampled down here to see what people in Southwest Florida thought about climate change. And we asked people, what we call value statements. 90% of us or so down here think that we have a right to clean air, we have a right to clean water, and we have a moral responsibility to create a safe and healthy climate for our kids. Those were the three highest things that came out of the survey. And then 84 of us down here say that we need to prepare for floods and droughts. And then 67% says the government needs to protect people from extreme weather. Anytime you put the word government in a question, it goes down 5 or 10 points. I just want to let you know. So there's a lot of little tricky polling things like that. This is from the Naples paper. When the survey came out, it was a half-hour NPR segment all over the place. But these are just general values. People down here like mangroves a lot. And they think that the weather and flooding down here is going to threaten our community. And they're worried about sea level rise. 69% the blue-green algae and the red algae. I came down here the first time down here during one of the algae blooms, and I stayed at a big hotel in Naples. It was almost all empty. And I said, why? And they said, go look at the canals. So then what can we do about it? What do people in Southwest Florida, what do they think we can do about climate change? Basically, about 3/4 of us think that we can and should do something about climate change. And 90% of us down here want more wind and solar. 60% say less coal. And 50% realize now that wind and solar are the lowest cost energy sources. This compares Southwest Florida to a national sample. And if you look at all the impacts, what people are worried about, the blue bar is higher in 2 areas. You guys are worried about extreme weather more than most Americans, and you guys are worried about increased flooding more than most Americans. But the rest of the things, the heat waves, clean air, the values are pretty consistent with what the rest of America says. When you ask about how we should solve climate change, the values here are very consistent with the national samples. Modernizing the grid, tax breaks for clean energy, expanding public transportation. It's pretty much across the board. There's no huge difference. When we came down here, we thought that there might be less concern for climate change around here, but it's not the case. So there's a big transition going on in the world today. And we'll start off with this graph. This is a Volkswagen plant in Zwickau, Germany, that they're investing $1.2 billion in one plant. This one plant makes 300,000 gasoline-powered cars. 2019, a little bit less. By next year, it's going to make 300,000 electric cars. They're just shifting 100% of their production to electric cars. And if you look around and you say, like, why are they doing it? Why has Porsche said that they're not going to make, that the Porsche will be 100% electric by 2030? France, China, there are 30% of the people in the world are living in a country that has announced that they're going to ban fossil fuel cars. And most of them have already set dates for it. And to get the kind of energy that we need to replace that, there's huge energy projects. I've got one from solar plus storage project, and then this one over here with the wind turbines. In Montana, they're building one dam on the top of a hill to fill up with water for $1 billion. And all it is going to be a whole bunch of solar panels that pump water up. And then when they need energy, it's going to release the water back down and generate electricity. And then, of course, the infrastructure for the electric cars is coming all across America. So we're in transition here. And just is Thursday last week, and this is Microsoft Corporation, the second most valuable corporation in the world, and they have announced that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2030, no net emissions. But the lady in the middle there, the CFO, has the key thing. They're going to remove all their historical carbon emissions by 2050. Everything that they have done, everything that all of their suppliers have done, they're going to repay 100% of their carbon debt. They're going to do offsets for every bit of emission since the first Microsoft software was released. It's not that unusual. And why are people doing that? Well, if you go back 10 years ago, this is 2009, that yellow line is solar. By far the most expensive energy source that you could possibly have. Number two, $135 per megawatt hour is come all the way down to $40 and $41. They've gone from the most expensive electricity sources to the least expensive energy sources in the world, in America and the world. And so what does that mean for energy? This is all the announced plans to build new utility scale power plants in America in 2020. And so all of it that's going to be built, 44% of it's going to be wind, 30% is going to be solar PV. So we've got 76% is wind or solar, and the other 22% is natural gas. But they're also retiring 3.7 gigawatt hours of natural gas. So when you really get down to it, they're going to take away a third of what they're doing up there. And functionally, 80% plus of all the utility scale energy that's going to be built in America in the next year is all going to be wind and solar. Cost less money. Wind and solar with battery storage right now is 3.4 cents a kilowatt hour. And if I ask you, I say, how much does an average American spend for electricity right now? The average American spends 13.3 cents. So the cost for energy for all Americans is going to be going down as we replace stuff with wind and solar. Two historic things both these are from last week. These are not old data. This was the last planned coal power plant in America, in Kansas. Decade ago, there were 250 coal-powered plants that they were going to build. This is the last one, and they just announced that they're not going to build it last week. So no more coal in America ever. And then a lot of people are worried about losing all the coal for various reasons. And so Ohio has passed a bill, and now Indiana last week introduced a bill where they're saying, we don't care how much energy costs, we don't care about the pollution. What we care about is you cannot shut down that plant. They want to potentially keep the jobs or some financial interest. So they're trying to pass bills because people are shutting down existing coal plants and natural gas plants and replacing them with wind and solar. Go into the investment world and to date, 1,100 institutions with $11 trillion have said that they're no longer going to invest in fossil fuels. And you say, wow, we all make a lot of money in fossil fuels. This is just the Dow Jones Industrial Averages energy, gas, oil, fossil fuels. The worst performing of all the indices in Dow Jones over the past decade has been energy. We've got a 3% increase over a whole year, as opposed to if you had invested in consumer discretionary things, you would have made 343% return over the decade. So it's not hard for these guys to do it. And in fact, this is from yesterday's Financial Times. And they said, they're talking about BlackRock. BlackRock is the largest institutional investor of $1.5 trillion. They're divesting from fossil fuels and encouraging all their portfolio companies to avoid the risk of climate change. Financial Times says the reason why they're doing it is because solar funds light up returns, that they're making a lot more money investing in solar energy than they're making investing in coal and oil. So, you know, we're building, these are all utility scale installations in America, utility scale powering cities, towns, states that are being built in the last 5 years in the United States. If you want a power plant and you want to decide what you're going to build, you build it wind or solar. Okay? And for the same reason, there's some political pressure that's trying to accelerate this whole thing. And so you've got, I think, 10 states that have passed laws that say that they're going to go to 100% clean energy, and a bunch of others that where the governors have said that they want to go there. And you've got 204 cities and counties, including a whole bunch of people here in Florida. 72 cities and counties in 7 states are already 100% powered by clean energy, right? So, and this is Europe. This is a whole continent. This isn't a company. This isn't a city. This is a whole continent. They have announced a €1 trillion plan to switch from fossil fuels to clean energy. And a whole lot of that money is going to towns where if you go to a town that has a coal plant and you shut it down, you not only put those people out of work, you probably destroy the largest tax base that they have in that town. So it shuts down education, it shuts down stuff. The Europeans are very sensitive to that, and so a whole bunch of this money is going to make up for how, you know, it's not your fault if the job that you have and your father had and his father had goes away. If that didn't happen because of you, I think society has some responsibility to help you out, and that's what they're doing there. But by 2050, they will be climate neutral too, no net emissions. This is a conservancy. Let's go back to the natural world. That's Alaska, tundra. You ever see a cutaway view of, they talk about the snow and the grass, and that's what it looks like. But if you take a look at, like today, as we're sitting here, there's a conference going on in Davos, right? The World Economic Forum. And if you take a look at what the World Economic Forum, this is just a survey of this past year, it's 890 large businesses, and they say, what are the biggest risks that we have facing business globally? And the top 5, weather, biodiversity, climate, natural disasters, human-made environmental disasters. If you went back 10 years ago, one of these things were green. Now the top 5 are green. And if you take a look at these other ones underneath here, water crises, that sounds like a drought, something happening in Australia. Involuntary migration, your farms dry up. Social instability. You can almost say that almost everything that these business people are worried about, except for cyber attacks here and data fraud, almost everything that they're worried about has something to do with climate change. So the business world is going radically that direction. I'm not going to go into any of this, but I did want to show you that last year, and especially in the last 6 months, there were 2 big reports from the US administration, the 4th National Climate Assessment, which is mandated by law, 13 agencies. And then NOAA and NASA are the 2 biggest agencies in the US that study climate change. They did their Arctic report card. The UN issued 3 different studies last year. When you get a copy of the presentation, you can just go look these up all online, but they all basically say the same thing, that it's happening much more quickly than we thought it was going to happen. That stuff that was going to happen in 2050 is happening in 2020. Stuff that was supposed to happen in 2030 happened back in 2013. It's just happening a lot more quickly than we thought. And why? Well, you take a look at this. This is coal mine, right? And everybody here intuitively knows that if I light a piece of coal and I put it on that floor, you flee. If you want to kill yourself the best way, go in the garage and turn on your car. But for some reason, people think that if we do enough of it, it's okay. If we can just do tons of fossil fuels and put that stuff in the atmosphere, it's not a problem to burn it there, but you all know that it is a little bit of a problem. And then just a couple slides on the natural world and climate change. This is where we were on December 16th in terms of CO2 in the atmosphere. People talk about variations. Yeah, there's various variations, but we are putting in tons and tons of carbon into the atmosphere, and it's much higher. And of course, the temperatures are going up. There's hundreds of versions of these graphs. This is NASA, and that's Scripps Institute out in San Diego. And of course, if it gets warmer, the expected things would happen. That this is the little gray area is the normal range of ice. And then if you take a look 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, today, the ice is steadily melting. We've got about 40% less ice than we used to have down there. And it's all new ice, all the old ice. Essentially, all of the old ice is gone right now in the Arctic. And I mentioned, thank God that they've had a lot of storms last week. They went through a while where they were burning down a Rhode Island every day, 1 million square acres a day in Australia. They burned down over 20 million acres this year. We were very worried about the Amazon fires, and we've been worried about the big fires in the US, 500,000 acres. This says 11 million. I did that about 2 weeks ago, and now if you look it up, it's over 20 million acres that have been burned. So their fires are 40 times the size of the biggest things that have happened to us in America, and it's changed the landscape. The amount of property value loss, the amount of GDP loss, it's going to be measured in years of GDP loss, and they are still out there trying to sell all the coal that they can. Something else that you're going to hear more and more about, not just because the UN is telling it, but everything that I read now is biodiversity loss, that things are changing. There's no such thing as a natural environment. I was talking to Rob about this a little while ago, that because of the temperature changes, the fish that were in Monterey Bay 30 years ago are different than the fish that are there today, and those fish are going to be different than the ones that are going to be there 30 years from now. So the whole natural world is changing because of the ocean currents and air currents and the temperatures. And you look at the impacts on people. This is NOAA, and who is this? Oh, this is Politico. Well, that's NOAA. This one's Politico. People wonder about storms. People say, are there more storms or less storms? If you take a look at these are major flooding things, and going back, the biggest years of major flooding going back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s are now the smallest years of flooding. This is just in America, we're getting twice as much. I hate to be so cheery about all this, but we're getting twice as much flooding. We're getting more hurricanes and storms. I've got a slide on that. These are the biggest disasters in America, and of course, we're in Florida. Boy, the map isn't showing up on this, but there's a map here, and then there's Florida is right here. And all around it, we've had some pretty huge hurricanes, and they're happening more and more. You have big storms in the Midwest. You have the droughts in the western states and the fires in the far west. It's all happening to America. Station break. Okay, so this is what I do. My day job is helping large national associations do climate programs. Like I'll show you the American Public Health. So we are all the time, every week, doing trainings for health organizations, faith organizations, and community organizations. And so what EcoAmerica does, we try to build institutional leadership for climate change. We did our first 6 years work was just in higher education. We did lots of programs there. and now we're doing health, faith, and communities. And so we have 110 different national organizations that we work with on climate change. About 45 of them we have contracts with where we do their climate program. We build their policy papers with them, we build their websites, we do guides for their members, everything that they can. So we do the Episcopal Church, the Lutheran Church, the the Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, North American Islamic Association, Jewish Council on Public Affairs. There's a couple dozen different denominations that we work with, a lot of health organizations, and what we do is, to do this right, we do a lot of research. How do you talk about climate change? What do you actually do? So I have, and I'll leave them with Rob, if you are a health organization or a church and you want to know what to do about climate change, we publish with dozens of partners. We make guides for different organizations to help them figure out how to address it. And we do a lot of different polling too. This is, I'm not going to play these for you, but this is Michael Curry, the Episcopal Church. He runs the Episcopal Church. He married the royal couple and has done a lot of other things. But he's doing this. This is the Episcopal Church. We do not, well, this one says EcoAmerica on it. Usually they don't say EcoAmerica on it because the Lutheran Church wants to be relevant to its members. They want to have their own program. They don't want to join somebody else. So we work behind the scenes helping these people build climate programs. This is what we did with the American Public Health Association's fact sheets, infographics, 3 videos, 5 different continuing education programs, just a whole raft of things so that they can engage all their members on climate change. This is the National League of Cities, and every community in America is part of the national. I think there's only 35 that don't draw resources or are paying members of the National League of Cities. These guys help, if you become a new mayor or councilman, or these guys help you do it. So that's what we do. And we do one big event a year, which I'll tell you, if you're really into climate change, at the end of March, you can come to DC. We do the American Climate Leadership Summit. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it. You can see it on the website. But it's the only place where you can really go and talk to all the experts and the politicians. There's a lot of politicians that come. And we all talk about climate change. So let's go back to Florida. I think anybody that's been around here for a long time will tell you that it's a little bit different than it has been in the past. And there's a website called sealevelrise.org that tracks all the buoy data and all the other data, and they publish all kinds of great reports if you want to see specifically. But as Rob started out saying, with the sea turtles and stuff, climate change basically impacts everything around here and everything in our lives. And in particular in Naples and in Fort Myers, these are the cities that are going to be most impacted over the next decade on climate change. And number 5 is Fort Myers, which is going to go, these are days with a heat index above 105. So on the right, Fort Myers, 26 days above 105. By 2030, 135. By 2050, 157 days. It's going to get warmer around here. And these guys are rating Fort Myers and Naples as 2 of the top 20 cities in America, 25 cities. But obviously we've got Tampa down here too, and Miami. So Florida is going to get impacted by climate change. This is hurricanes. A lot of people wonder about whether or not hurricanes are more frequent or more severe because of climate change. Our friends at NOAA just analyze all the data, and this is from December. This data is about a month old, and these charts are about a month old, but they're basically showing you with the black line is what is actually happening with hurricane frequency and severity, and they're saying that basically the way they say it, if it was a 100-year storm, it's going to be a 20-year storm. If it's a 20-year storm, it's probably going to be a 5-year storm, and if it's a 5-year storm, it's going to happen pretty often. And then the Union of Concerned Scientists did this study in the middle of 2018. This is the oldest data I have. But basically the thing that I took away from their study on real estate, they talk about property values and what's going to happen, that 93% of Florida's at-risk homes would avoid flooding if we can stick with the Paris Climate Accord goals. which are getting increasingly out of it. So all that's saying is that if we do something about climate change, that we can have an impact. And Florida is doing a lot. DeSantis, the first thing that he did, his very first day of office, he put out a $1 billion climate resiliency fund, right? And if you know, today the Republicans introduced their climate legislation because a lot of the voters are indicating right now that climate change is a big issue. They just issued an energy innovation, forestry, and plastics thing to be their plan to adjust climate change. But I think this is just last week again. Yeah, January 15th. The state's buying Everglades land so that people won't develop oil wells on it. Florida Power and Light is building the largest privately owned solar farm and solar plus storage in the world. So you've got, a lot of things happening down here. Florida was a little slow, but you guys seem to be catching up pretty quickly with this whole thing. This is what I wanted to show you. Okay, these are all the cities in America. The ones at the top are the ones that have achieved 100% clean energy. And these are the cities in Florida that have committed to, the ones with the blue boxes that have committed to clean energy. And if we can somehow get Fort Myers and Naples up here, that would be cool, right? And the reason for doing this, you guys still, my daughter lives in Miami, and she's on a sea level rise commission. She's an architect. And if you go from like Miami north, you can drive forever, and there's no coastal natural areas at all. It's nothing but buildings for as far as, and I go here, we just took our family vacation on North Captiva Island last Christmas for a week, right? You have to take a boat to get to the darn thing. But, the natural areas that you guys have around here are remarkable and beautiful, and you actually have corridors that are connecting these different natural areas together. And if the Conservancy can do what Rob wants it to do and what everybody here probably wants it to do, we're going to protect as much of these things as you can, because it gives us clean air, it gives us clean water, it protects us from storms, and it protects all the biodiversity that we have. So there's a new film by REI called The Last Green Thread. It's about the corridors in Florida and how those are, what people are doing to protect those. All right, so then Rob talked about, we do only what we call 3 subnational programs. We do the program for Los Angeles, and we do the program for Salt Lake City. And then when John came up to me and said, hey, the people down in Naples would be interested in talking about a climate program, I thought, hey, that's kind of interesting. The reason why we picked LA is because it's a mess. It's 25 million people. And the reason why we picked Salt Lake City is because it's a very cohesive Mormon conservative town. See if we can do that. This place here has its own challenges, and one of them is you don't have a big hub city. Like if you're in Salt Lake City, you kind of control the state. If you're in LA, you kind of control, but you've got Fort Myers and Naples and a whole bunch of other communities, so it's hard to do stormwater systems. It's hard to do transportation programs. It's hard to do things in this area. And then of course you have all the seasonal people that come in, and so there's a lot of interesting challenges, and we thought, well, if we can come down here and help a climate program get going, we can use that as an example for other parts of the country. So as Rob said, the 2 community foundations have been spectacular leaders, Eileen and Sarah, and they are kicking in, more than just words. They're kicking in significant funds to help this community prepare for climate change. And then Florida Gulf Coast University, and then the Conservancy. The Conservancy, Rob is the coordinating agent and running this whole program, but we're going to try to move Southwest Florida more toward climate solutions. 5 goals, really simple. Empower the community leaders to act, protect natural assets, prosperous and healthy community, make sure people understand the issue, and then increase there's a lot of stuff that's going on here on climate change that people just don't know about. So we're trying to increase the visibility of all that. So, you'll see we've had a lot of meetings, and we're still working on stuff. I think the official launch, Anna is going to tell me, is on May 10th. May 7th? 27th. Yeah, I was close. But But there's a lot of work that's going into this, and all of you will have an opportunity to engage. They're doing some initial meetings and things like that, but we're doing polling, like I said, to understand what people think. We're trying to understand the natural environment, which nothing better than the Conservancy to have. But there'll be videos and websites and programs for companies and churches and every organization here to engage and do something about climate change, because we all can do something and we all need to do something. And so they're going to ask you to do things like participate in the initiative and engage your organization and community, try to get everybody here engaged in doing what they can to move climate solutions forward in Southwest Florida. You'll be really happy 10 years from now if you can do a lot on climate change now. And then this is some of the things that you can do individually on climate change. And the most important single thing you can do is talk about it. Just talk about it. No matter where you are on the spectrum of I'm really concerned, I'm less concerned, to the extent you talk about it, you learn more and you can engage others in it and you can help move the community into a particular direction. Now, I just have 3 slides here, and this is the downer part for me. We are nowhere near getting where we need to go as a planet. And this is, if we had like the first yellow lines, if we had started reducing our emissions in 2007, it would have been kind of an easy track. But the more stuff that we keep putting up there, the steeper the drop off in fossil fuels has to be to keep us at 1.5 degrees, which is what they say will keep the world in a reasonable condition. And so we are working to increase ambition. You know, if you're going to offset a plane flight, do 200% instead of 100%. If you've got a business, rather than getting to 0 emissions now, maybe get to 0 emissions really quickly and then take care of your historical emissions. And then help restore the natural world and make sure that we include everybody. I've been a card-carrying member of the environmental movement for about 15 years. My last job, I shouldn't say this, but I was running a company that was cutting down 10,000 trees a week, okay? And they were mostly in New Zealand, Scandinavia, and Australia, but we were mailing, and John was on the board with me, we were mailing out over 1 million 100-page catalogs a day. And so I have a lot to pay back too, but we ignore, we don't take into account there's a lot of people that are being impacted, health disparities, income disparities, elderly people that are being impacted. We have to engage everybody on climate change. So that is what I have to say, and I think we have a little bit of time for questions. Rob, you want to moderate?
Yeah, I can moderate.
I'm going to go back to some pretty picture or something. First of all,